Yeah.
All right, here we go. All right, so maybe.
You're sharing the presenter mode screen again.
Yeah, I see that. Hold on, let me fix that. Well,
Not confused, not mine. I'll buy one.
well.
Oh, it was there, and now it's back.
Yeah, but then it went off the screen here. I'm glad we're recording the fact that I still, after all this time, don't know what I'm doing. Who was the one who helped me figure this out last time?
So Rob, you're trying to split screen.
Yeah, I thought it was just. Duplicate. I do that, but then I lose it on this screen.
Can you drag? You can probably drag one side over.
Do what now? PowerPoint is not my only video. Yeah.
So can this be split into two things? Is
It's
that-
actually up here.
Yeah, probably for the wrong,
It's
probably
in,
for the wrong
uh,
version.
27.
2012.
You were one of the
That's good. All right, are you guys online? You guys see? Does it look all right? Yep. I'll take that as a.
Looks good, yeah. Thanks, Rob.
All right. Okay, so last time we talked about the Trinity and God the Father, and where we sort of left it off was the idea that creation, although we call God the Father the Creator, it's a work of all three persons of the Trinity, and that each person sort of acts in accord with their own like personal property, and then for that reason we call God Father, right? And so now we're going to talk about creation itself, what God creates. We'll talk a little bit about the angels in the end, and only probably just a little bit, and I'll talk about why only just a little bit, and then we'll kind of move from there. All right, so just like last week, when we start by talking about creation being a mystery. If you remember, mystery meaning that we can't possibly sort of get to the bottom of it. We can't comprehend it. We can apprehend it, but not comprehend it, right? So we can know, right? When Adam's created, God brings the animals to him, and why does he do that? To name them. Well, in naming them, it's that he knows them, right? And so we have the capacity to know all things, although we can never actually comprehend them. Yes.
So when you say no, when we think about the idea these creatures have a nature, how much did he like actually know their nature perfectly, or was it just kind of
No, it's only God would know. Only God knows the nature of a thing perfectly, right? So he knows what what the thing was, the depth of what it, like how well he knew. I don't know. Like that would be in and of itself probably not something we could grasp because he knew all that he should know about them, or whatever that is. But he could still learn, right? So he could still learn by experience and things like that. So.
So it wasn't like an angelic knowledge where he just kind of had the nature in his head.
No. So he still would have it. So he would still know the way that humans know. Although, I guess the analogy would be, I mean, his knowledge of those things would have been infused. He would have been created with that knowledge. But it would have been in the sense of kind of like how the apostles knew all the truths of the faith, right? Where, he knew things. He knew a bunch of first principles and could connect them back, but initially he may not realize that he knew something, right?
So all the things that he named, he knew by God's infusion of them.
Yes. Yeah. So he would have known them by he was infused with knowledge. Because think about it. So Adam is created, and we'll talk more about this next week, as like a full-grown adult, right? So he doesn't have the experience of growing up and learning. Like all of his knowledge that he has sort of came in the package that he had. All right, so when we talk about creation as a mystery, then that's sort of what we mean, okay? So what I want to do is, we've talked about sort of the purpose of this is to go through, more or less go through the catechism and kind of unpack what's in the catechism. So I have almost everything we're going to talk about today is just building on some of the paragraphs in the catechism. And so the catechism comes up with this sort of heading of the mystery of creation. It says, God creates by wisdom and love. We believe that God created the world according to his wisdom. It is not the product of any necessity whatever, nor blind fate or chance. We believe that it proceeds from God's free will. He wanted to make his creatures share in his being, wisdom, and goodness. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. Therefore the psalmist exclaims, O Lord, how manifold are your works, and wisdom you have made them all, and the Lord is good to you, to all, and his compassion is over all that he has made. So immediately we're sort of struck by the Trinitarian aspect of this, right? So the Catechism talks about wisdom and love, right? Who is the wisdom of the Father? It's the Son, right? And who's the love, right? And so it's this act of all three persons acting, and this sort of initiation on the part of God the Father, right? And so we see how, and we'll talk more about this, how it's through his omnipotence that God can make something from nothing. And we say that, and we'll talk more about it, but it's not really that God takes nothing and makes it into something. He just makes something, right? We don't really have words to sort of describe that. All right, so why do we start with it? Why do we start with creation? Like, why is it important to sort of understand it, right? And why do we do it? Why do we profess it right away that God is the creator of everything? Why does it matter?
Well, he knows it, then if he created it, then he knows it perfectly.
Yeah, so God created and knows it, right? But if we're going to start, when you start to study something, right, what's the first thing you should always ask? Why? Why is this here, right? Because that's going to inform every answer you find further down the line. And you can see why if you wanted to, if you could change that or not ask that question any longer, you can sort of sway the way people learn about creation. Yes?
This might be kind of a weird question, jumping ahead, but so God created both spiritual beings and spiritual angels and material beings in us and in the animals. And so kind of Credo almost in these two, like, not dualistic in the sense that they're not opposed, but just two kind of modes or two types, broad types of creatures. And normally when we think of God being spiritual, we think of spiritual things. We say, okay, they're in our world only by kind of how they act, and God's omnipotent, he's everywhere in the sense that he's acting on everything. Where, like, so before God created space, or just, I guess there's just no space, like there's no, like, can we just not visualize that because there's almost nothing to visualize?
So when you say before, like, he's already initiated creation, or before? Like,
So I guess there is no time before creation because time is a part of creation.
Yes.
Could you say, was there a time, when God says, okay, let there be light, and I think Augustine says that's when he created the angels, and it's before he creates the earth. Like, there's this idea, okay, there was a time which there were angels but not material creation, or is that it was an instantaneous thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably fair to say so in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? And so in the heavens, normally that's referring to sort of the angelic realm, right? And the earth. So were those two things instantaneous? No. Were they both on the first day? Yes. Right. I don't think that it's the problem is that he had not. See, God doesn't create in time the way we think he does, and we're going to talk a lot about this. He creates with time, right? So time is one of the things he creates. So it's really difficult for us to talk about like how things happen with time when he's still creating time, right? So we'll come back to, I think if we come back to when we get to like creation, we talk about the 6 days, then we can talk about it more. If that makes sense.
And then
Go ahead.
this, you might want to follow this later when we
Okay.
have time. But so I was watching there was a debate between Father Gregory Pine and atheists in which they were talking, basically debating whether God exists. And one of the objections that the atheists kind of continue to bring up is the idea of God's. He was arguing that God would have to have knowledge of change, and then one of the examples he gave was that you had to know that now is now, and then 5 minutes ago is now. And I understand the idea that okay, God's outside of time, like there is no this eternal now for him. We're talking about how angels perceive time differently. So is there really such thing as a now? And if so, like why is now now? Or what is this? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so I mean, this is way beyond what we're going to talk about, but I can give you the sort of the gist of it is that now is really the only thing that exists, but we have to put like thickness to it, right? Because what is now? Like, what is that? I mean, it could be infinitesimally small, so that's why we measure time, like so that we can put a thickness to it, and that's why like Augustine says time is the measure of before and after. And I think that's probably as deep as I should get. Like, I hate to get us stuck in talking about time.
So you would say God creates with time. So when he rests on the seventh day, was he just not creating?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that too, but the answer to the question is yes. So we'll talk about it in a second. All right. So we said then the first thing that we should always sort of grasp is why does God create, or why is there anything rather than nothing? Okay. Here's what the Catechism says. Saint Bonaventure explains that God created all things not to increase his glory, but to show it forth and to communicate it. For God has no other reason for creating than his love and goodness. Creatures came into existence when the key of love opened his hand. All right, so God is infinite joy, infinite love, and he has no reason to create. So he's under no compulsion to create, right? The compulsion comes in the fact that he's just simply, the nature of being good is that it diffuses itself. Like it wants to spread out. It wants to, so what God wants to do is not only just to create because there's goodness, he wants to make creatures who could also appreciate it, right? So that's somehow in accord with his goodness, that's one of the things that his goodness does, okay? So think of it as it gives him pleasure to see us take pleasure in existence, right? We, on the other hand, sort of have trouble grasping at something that's so altruistic, right? Like we can't imagine, like no reason at all to create, like no necessity is reason, but there's no necessity. And to think of just totally doing something for the benefit of something else, right? But what this sort of gets at is what Bonaventure is talking about here. And he's talking about not to increase his glory, but to show it forth and to communicate it. What is glory? What is God's glory? Right? It's one of those terms we throw around like grace, but probably need to sit and to talk about, okay, what do we mean when we talk about glory? Like, hopefully you want to give God glory, but you already had glory, so I'd have to give it to him. So let's try to unpack glory a little bit, and then it'll help us understand creation. So what's glory? Somebody tell me what glory is.
The external manifestation of goodness.
Okay. The external manifestation of goodness. So God has no glory until he creates.
Well, I didn't say he is good, therefore he creates. He has glory prior to it.
Okay.
Also, we did say manifestation.
Right. Okay. Well, he said external manifestation. That's why
Well, like something can be before it manifests itself. It doesn't necessarily have to be.
Would it be external to God if it were?
Yeah, I think the external part is what I'm struggling on, not the manifestation.
It could have been
lost now.
It could internally have been manifested.
Don't worry about it.
I've never been lost before, but now this is it.
So the goodness could, like, it would be internally manifested prior to creation, but then once it's externally manifested, creation has to.
So let's back up
If
then.
you-
Does God have glory in and of himself?
Yes.
Okay. Then what is that thing? What is that?
I was gonna say something completely different.
Go for it.
I was gonna say
Take
like,
us down another.
it's like so it's like the phrase like someone says that I'm doing something for my own glory. It's like I'm doing something for my like own. How I picture it is you do something for your own glory. You do something to have like a positive reinforcement of your identity, right? When you do something for your own glory, it's related to that. So I was gonna say like what glory is just it's the displaying of who you are, right?
Okay, you had me until you said the last part, and I think you were really close to what we're talking about. So, is it a displaying of who you are, or of your properties or attributes, or something about you?
Well, it's a result of action, right? So like part of being properties or attributes.
Okay. All right. So God, we can't know God as He is, right? But we can know Him through His sort of attributes, right? And this is what we're sort of getting at. His goodness, His power, His wisdom, and God Himself. So what did we talk about last week? What does God do? Like, what does He do for all eternity? Yeah, so knows and wills something, right? But what is it? What does He actually like acknowledge in terms of contemplation? What is God contemplating? Himself. Just me, or the beauty and refulgence of that is God. Like all of it, not just like the person, but everything about God. Like His attributes. So think in terms of all right, let's come at it this way. In the Magnificat, Mary says, "My soul magnifies the Lord." Right? Why does she say that?
It shows forth God's goodness.
Yeah, so she makes something of God visible, right? She makes the invisible visible. What is it that she's making visible?
God the Son.
Well, make like that, but okay. Okay, so it's fine. Like, it doesn't matter which one of the attributes you pick because she does a pretty good job of most of them. But the point is that think in terms of like God's beauty, right? Does that term help? Like God's glory is His beauty, and like what's beauty? Yeah, I mean that's beautiful, but what is beauty in and of itself, right?
So I've heard it described that like goodness is like I would say the transcendentals like goodness is being viewed by the will, goodness like truth is being viewed by the intellect, and so beauty is perceived by, as you say, the senses or something like that. But it seems to fall short because we'd also say that like the soul, Mary's soul was far more beautiful than she was externally, but you can't see a soul unless in some sort of
Well, you can observe. Would that be a better word? Like you can observe like
The effects of it.
yeah.
Okay, so all right, so I totally took us down a rabbit hole again. I wanted you to be able to begin to think about what it means to give glory to God, right? And so when you glorify God, what does that normally entail? In your prayer, like if you give God glory, what does that mean? Yes, there's gratitude. Okay, what triggers it? Yeah, love and some awareness of something about God, right? So what you're really doing is you're not giving Him glory, you're handing it back to Him, right? Your soul is magnifying the Lord, right? Like that's what makes Mary so beautiful, right? Is she sort of redounds God's beauty back to God, right? And that's what humans were made for, right? So when you say you were made for the glory, to give glory to God, God made us, like we just talked about, made us to appreciate him, right? And when we give that back to him, that's giving him glory, right? He doesn't need it. There's no need on his part to receive it, but there's a need on our part to give it, right? Yes.
I was gonna say like this is the Westminster Catechism, but it's still kind of applies. First part of that. The first thing is like man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Like
yeah,
it's like our purpose.
Everything exists for the glory of God. Everything. Because everything bears it's either imprint or image, right? Everything. And so God made us to look at those things and go back to him and go, I now know something a little bit more about you. Praise and glory to you. Like, that's what we were made for, right? That's what all of creation is for, everywhere you look, right? So when you go into a Catholic church, normally, there are definitely some differences. You will look around and usually you'll see things like stars, or you'll see vines, or hopefully both. Why are those there? In a church, yes.
Images of the heavens and the garden.
Yeah. So, well, the heavens and the garden, but why? Why do we need the images of the garden, right? What was the garden made for? It was supposed to be the temple, right? So, like, this is why Christ, when he's talking about the end of the world and he's mixing it with the destruction of the temple, right? Like, this was the place God made that he was going to walk in the garden of the cool of death, right? That doesn't necessarily work like that, but it's going to work like that, right? It will work like that at some point, right? And so that's the whole purpose of creation. And so we need to grasp that, right? And that's why we have to actually go and see what God has made, right? We have to be able to see it. We have to be able to experience it, and we have to train ourselves to be moved by it. Right? And that's the idea, right? So when something moves you, give glory to God. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. That's why God made it, right? And it can be as simple as thing. And we can't ever forget that, right? We can't ever forget that everything exists for the glory of God, okay? And of course, there's always two temptations within, and Stevie already talked about a little bit of one, right? The first temptation is that we look at the thing and we love it so much we forget about the Creator, right? But the second thing is, along the lines of what Stevie was saying, is we hold the glory out on to ourselves, right? We're like, I'm not giving this back. I'm not giving this back, right? And that's what Satan did, right? And we just imitate it every time we do that, right? So as we go through this, don't forget that. Like, don't forget when you walk around this week that, like, our fundamental stance is like gratitude and awe, right? And just recognizing that's how we should live, right? With gratitude and awe. All right. So that's what it means to give glory to God. All right. So there are essentially, once we sort of get a glimpse of God, why God creates the universe, now we can begin to examine it. Okay, and that's what we're going to do. So the Catechism says there's two fundamental questions. Catechesis on creation is of major importance. It concerns the very foundation of human and Christian life, for it makes explicit the response of the Christian faith to the basic question that men of all times have asked themselves: where do we come from and where are we going? What is our origin? What is our end? Where does everything that exists come from and where does it go? The two questions, the first about the origin and the second about the end, are inseparable. They are decisive for the meaning and orientation of our life and our actions. All right? So these two questions then are the whole reason why we study creation. Okay? They're the sort of the basis, right? So, and this is not surprising that if you're going to attack the Christian worldview, you attack either one of these things, right? Or both. All right. And so how we answer these questions pretty much determines the way we look at everything, right? Everything. So we're going to sort of look at them and see what we can do. All right, so let's talk about the doctrine of creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Three things are affirmed in these first words of Scripture. The eternal God gave a beginning to all that exists outside of himself. He alone is creator. The verb create, Hebrew barah, always has God for the subject. The totality of what exists, expressed by the formula of the heavens and the earth, depends on the one who gives it being. All right, so a couple things that we can sort of unpack with it. So it's God alone who creates, right? Only God, we can make, things can participate in making things, but only God creates, right? Only he has the power to simply just by speaking bring something into existence that didn't exist before, all right? And he doesn't need pre-existing material. And everything that exists is made out of nothing, right? And nothing that exists was made by him, right? That's St. John. So the obvious part of that is that if it's made out of nothing, if he ceases to give it existence, it soon becomes nothing. Okay, instantly becomes nothing. And again, go ahead.
Has that ever happened?
Something poof out of existence? I don't know. Like, I haven't ever seen it.
Right, we talk about it and like, it's not like that does ever happen. We just say God can't stop thinking.
Yeah,
about
so
something
so he has said in the Book of Wisdom, he said that he would never do that. And so we just have to, it could happen, and I'm assuming if you take him at his word, then it wouldn't. But we can't even imagine something coming into existence, right? Like, can you just imagine something not existing and then being there? Right? Even our images to do that. Like, just for a moment, even begin to think about what. So in the beginning, God created, okay, we have to immediately make a space in which he created, right, in our mind. Like, we just can't imagine just everything, things coming into being that didn't exist before. All right, Kyle, did you have a question?
So I think you just addressed it, and Keegan just talked about it too. How do we know there is not existential inertia in the sense that like God created and then just like, well, how do we know I can't just keep kind of going, like existing, and God kind of like gave me the push I needed into existence, and then I can just kind of keep on growing myself, unless he would just slap me down.
I mean, that would be not something you could prove. I mean, you can prove it from Revelation, but you can't. There's no way to know that, right? All right, so that image then of God sort of holding us in creation, right? Like, think about like when you stand in front of a mirror, right? Your image remains there as long as you're there, right? So it depends on it. All right, so here is where I want to sort of spend a little bit of time, and I suspect this will take us down a few rabbit holes, but I'm okay with it. All right, among all the scriptural texts about creation, the first three chapters of Genesis occupy a unique place. The inspired authors have placed them at the beginning of Scripture to express their solemn language, the truths of creation, its origin and its end in God, its order and goodness, the vocation of man, and finally the drama of sin and the hope of salvation. Read in the light of Christ, within the unity of sacred Scripture and the living tradition of the Church, these texts remain the principal source for catechesis on the mysteries of the beginning, creation, fall, and promise of salvation. All right. This looks like what we sort of talked about the first week when we talked about sacred Scripture, about when the fathers of the church sort of unanimously consent to a certain interpretation of Scripture, we have to hold it as definitively held. Okay? That's what this is sort of getting at when it says, read in the light of Christ within the unity of sacred Scripture and the living tradition of the church. Right? What I want to do is spend a few minutes kind of talking about, and we can go into much of detail as you guys want, the first three chapters of Genesis. All right, so first thing I want to do, this is long, but I want to read the whole thing, and then we'll sort of talk about it because this goes counter to a lot of what people say today and people teach in the church, right? So, all right, so just a word real quick. The Pontifical Biblical Commission was a part of the church's magisterium up until just before the Second Vatican Council. Then it was done away with. There is such thing called the Pontifical Biblical Commission now, but it's just a scholarly group because it doesn't have anything to do with the magisterium. Yes?
So we would still consider what it said when it was considered magisterium part of the magisterium.
Yes. Yes.
What they would say now is views.
Yeah. In fact, Pope St. Pius X, when he, in one of his motu proprios, actually said what this commission says is officially part of the magisterium. All right, so here's what they say, okay? And this is, again, some of these are really good in the, like, when they publish what are called dubia, where somebody asks a question and they answer it directly. Although this is a little long-winded, so we'll have to kind of go through a little bit. Notwithstanding the historical character and form of Genesis, the special connection of the first 3 chapters with one another and with the following chapters, the manifold testimonies of the scriptures, both of the Old and the New Testament, the almost unanimous opinion of the Holy Fathers and the traditional view which the people of Israel also has handed on, and the church has always held, may it be taught that the aforesaid 3 chapters of Genesis contain not accounts of actual events, accounts, that is, which correspond to objective reality and historical truth, but either either fables derived from mythologies and cosmogonies of ancient peoples and accommodated by the sacred writer to monotheistic doctrine after the expurgation of any polytheistic error. We'll go through this. Or allegories and symbols without any foundation in objective reality, proposed under the form of history to inculcate religious and philosophical truths. I have no idea what a mouthful this is. Or finally, legends, in part historical and in part fictitious, freely composed with a view to instruction and edification. The answer is in the negative to both parts. All right, so what is it saying?
Um,
Go ahead, you take a crack at it, go for it.
so the question is, like the statement was, the first 3 chapters of Genesis, they're just fables, wives' tales, mythologies.
How many of you guys have
Not
heard this
actually
before?
real.
Heard all of this, right? Okay, so what is it? What are they saying?
No.
No, they're not,
It
right?
real.
They're actual history. Okay?
So, follow-up question to that.
Okay.
I don't think I'm lying when I say that the church hasn't definitively taught that it's literal history either, correct? Like, this isn't saying that you have to jump from one extreme to the other. I think
Okay,
there
so-
is still a legitimate debate. I just wanted to make sure, like, I knew what that legitimate debate was.
Yeah, so the legitimate debate would be that there is an actual historical character to them, even if they're couched in poetic language, I think is the best word to use. And we're going to talk about why that might be if they're historical, and yet they're somehow also have this sort of poetic nature to them, right? But what I want to get away from is the idea that is really all over the place, that these are just sort of adaptations of myths, that they're fables, that they were, writings that were adapted, or just allegories and symbols. I want us to get away from that because that's the sort of prevailing mentality today. The people.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I've heard that, like, you have to hold that there were 2 first humans that committed a sin. Whether that sin was actually eating a fruit would be something that we don't know.
Yes.
That's kind of been the explanation I've heard.
Yeah.
Anthony just attacked Laura. She's fine.
Good. I was a little worried there.
Rob? Oh.
Yes.
So on the title slide, you had like Genesis, the book of Moses. So like, what does the church believe about like who wrote it? Because like that's not what I heard, but I think some people believe that. So do we know who wrote it or
Moses that wrote it? So this goes back to, again, our lack of sort of looking to that, what I said earlier about holding what the unanimous Holy Fathers, like the Fathers of the Church, actually held. And all of them hold that the first 5 books were written by Moses.
okay?
And the reason being is, what does Jesus say about them? He said, did you not read Moses, right? It's like, he's not talking about like Moses wrote something, right? And so that's the idea, right? What I want to move us back towards, and what the church needs to move back towards, is reading scripture literally. And only when you have a good reason not to read it that way, to do it, okay? And that's actually the holding of the church too, is that unless you have some compelling reason to read it in some symbolic way, then you should read it that way. Not just go, well, I never heard, that scholars say that Moses didn't write them. Well, the Word made flesh said he did, so I don't know. Who should we believe, right? So I don't think it's compelling, that's not compelling evidence enough, the scholars say, right? So we go, okay, it seems like Jesus is saying this, right? And then, look, all of the fathers of the church unanimously said Moses wrote the first 5 books. So I feel pretty comfortable saying Moses wrote the first 5 books. Again, is it like to be held definitively? Probably not, because it's not is it really that important of a truth? Probably not. But I have no good reason at this point to reject that. Yes, Keith.
Just to clarify the way this is written, everything except the very last line is the question, and the very last line is just the answer.
Yes.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
confused.
So yeah.
I love how the answer is just like
It's
nothing.
just no.
Like,
It's like
you know,
yeah.
it's-
Also,
answering it directly. How many? Is that one sentence? Because like I can only see commas.
Well, and I think like it's written in Latin too. It doesn't have any.
The punctuation.
Yeah, doesn't have any commas in it. So, and the words are all in different. Like, you got to put them back in order too. Yes.
This might be completely unrelated, but well, it's not completely related. We don't have to answer the question, but I do ask. How do verse numbers work when you have like languages that are probably written in different orders than the English words are put in English?
Yeah, I mean, verse numbers were just put in there in order to be able to reference them, right? So they have to be, they have to be what they are, no, right? And there's places in Scripture where it actually hurts, right? So like I'm thinking like the last line or the last sentence of chapter 11 of the book of Revelation, right? There's silence in heaven, and it talks about the Ark of the Covenant, and then it moves to chapter 12 and it talks about Mary, and you're like, unless you're really paying attention, you don't know the connection between the two. All right, so you can kind of see a little bit why, like where we're going with this. All right, so what I want to definitely move us away from is going, okay, these are just like nits. Okay. What I also want to move us away from is the idea that that a lot of people say this, so like, well, God didn't intend to write a science book. Okay. He could have, but he didn't. But not because he chose not to, but because he couldn't. Okay. And the reason he couldn't write a science book is because the first 6 days of creation they're not natural things. Everything that happens in those 6 days is supernatural. Okay. Science could not answer questions about it. You couldn't explain it in scientific terms. All right. So this idea of using oblique language, of course, it's explaining something miraculous, right? What kind of language can you use when just something just proofs into existence? Like, we don't really have like experiential language for that, right? Yes.
No, I mean, so if you take this as a as a principle that just creation is of itself is a supernatural event, I mean does that imply that any science attempting to go back and explain it is just it'd be the same way as like saying like science, I disproved God because I can't find God in the material world, therefore he doesn't exist.
So why would that be though? Why can't science go back into the first 6 days of creation?
Because science deals with natural phenomena.
Yeah, so that certainly is part of it.
We don't have anything to observe.
What was created during those 6 days? Science, the laws of science, right? God didn't. This is the part about time, right? God created with time, like not in time. God created the scientific laws, but he didn't create with them, right? So anything that was scientific that tried to go back to those first 6 days would limp, because guess what? The laws weren't there yet, right?
So like I mean this might be a thing we're about to talk about, like, but what about people who try to say that like the means by which the days happened was like evolution or something like that, how would you?
Yeah. So
if you think about it literally, then that would make it really difficult, wouldn't it?
yeah. So first of all, so the sort of question of like the if we believe that God created everything that exists, right, then, and he created it, not made it, he created it, then just in and of itself, that would eliminate some sort of like evolutionary explanation of like the universe, right? Because evolution essentially says that these secondary causes make the thing, right? Second, so church fathers well aware of evolution, right? That was a thing that the Greek atomists had made up, and they across the board reject it. They write about it. You can find it all throughout the church fathers, where they'll talk about the idea either of like an evolving universe or just an evolution of species, and all of them reject it. There's not a single church father that says this is how it happened.
Not for evolution on a whole. Just
Right.
Yeah,
so
that's-
even like a Big Bang wouldn't work, right?
That's interesting because I was thinking like if you assume that it is supernatural and then you go back and attempt to study it naturally, you would expect certain conclusions drawn to just not work. And there's a huge discrepancy, right? Some people say the world is 7,000 years old. Some people say it's 4 billion. But maybe the evidence that it's 4 billion is just because we're looking at it through the wrong lens.
Well, yeah. So
Yeah, I
again,
mean, and right, we still don't know the answer to that. It was an interesting thought because I've never heard a compelling argument against what seems to be pretty good scientific evidence.
well, see that's where the seems to is a problem, right? Because there's a whole set of assumptions being made, right, for the age of the universe, and there's just as good compelling evidence for it being young. So, I mean, the young Earth, there's plenty of scientific evidence for it as well. Even things like we do, like, when they date fossils, right? Guess what would happen if you tried to date fossils if there was a worldwide flood for 40 days? What would that do to like sediment buildup?
I mean, it look old real good.
Yeah, I mean, things are gonna look way older than they really are, right? And lo and behold, somehow they find these fossils that are in multiple layers. How does that happen? They're literally like the head is like 1 million years less than the body, or the top of the tree is 1 million years younger than the body. So there's a lot of things that people don't talk about. And again, I'm not saying like throw it all out, but I'm saying we have to be really careful of taking it as a given, that the scientific evidence is not, because it has a worldview attached to it. And so we have to be really careful about just going, oh, the scientific evidence is really good, because it's not as good as it appears to be. Yes?
What about the animals that we have fossils that show animals that clearly don't exist today, but kind of resemble things that are around, and we have fossils that kind of stamp of this looks similar, but this is a thing, and then this is a little bit different, and then we've got a little bit different, and then this is a lot more similar, and then we've got what we have today.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, again, when all of the earth was destroyed with animals in it, they certainly could have ended up in, as fossils, right? And I mean, so what Noah took on, again, this is an explanation. I'm not saying it's, the church isn't saying this is but there's just as good of an explanation that there's this flood that buries all the animals except what are on the ark, right? Then you can easily see, okay, well, these, that's why we have these, and maybe they're found in similar places because they were in similar places when the water took over.
Is the flood would we say that was a supernatural event or a natural event?
Yeah, so if you strictly, well, it would be supernatural, right? Because so again, I don't mind going down this rabbit hole a little bit, but I don't think we have any concept of what would happen to the world if it rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah.
Like how different the world would be when the waters receded. Like we don't even think about that for a second, right? We don't think about, wait a second, okay, there's a flood down in the Gulf, right, where from a hurricane, and suddenly the waters recede, and it was just a few hours, and the land is totally different, right? Think about it being underwater for everything being at least 30 feet underwater for 40 days of rain. Then don't even factor in that, for 6 months longer, the waters don't even recede. And I mean, it's almost a year of the whole world being underwater. That would drastically change the way the world was, right? So there are plenty of explanations that fit with a biblical worldview that are just as good. So my point is we have to be really careful about throwing out what we've believed for 2,000 years for science that is questionable, right? Like all we're doing is we're just waiting for Galileo again, right? Where we wed ourselves to a certain, and they're like, oh yeah, look, you guys had Genesis right to begin with. Why did you give it up? Why did you give that up, right? Because what happens is a lot of people go into Genesis and they're like, oh yeah, this is just a myth. I'm not gonna read the rest of this crappy book. Like, why would I read this when it starts with here? So of course there are people that go, oh, here's how we do it. If we can mess up the beginning, they'll never find the end. Right? So be
What
careful.
happened with Galileo?
What?
What happened with Galileo?
Well, so in essence, the church had sort of wed itself to like the Aristotelian understanding of physics, especially the way the planets moved, and he sort of had pretty good proof, even though he got some stuff wrong, that they were wrong, and it caused just a whole uproar in the church. Yeah.
It was a mess.
Yeah.
People really didn't want to believe that.
Yeah, like people didn't want to believe him, and then they didn't want to believe the church, and so we just have to be careful about making sure that we're not being sort of duped into thinking that, oh, this science is solid, because it's not. Like if you just do a little bit of research, it's not that solid. There's a lot of assumptions, right? There's a lot of assumptions being made.
That's why I'm a humanities major.
Exactly. Well, no, that's why we need Catholics to stand up and go, wait a second, hold on. Like, you know, the way we're dating things, fossils, like that assumes that like this uniform thing happens. And it can't happen that way because then there's no catastrophes, right? And if you actually look and you actually look at the sort of the different layers, there's nothing like erosion between a lot of them, which you would expect, right? And then ignore the whole fact that how do you get a fossil anyway? A thing dies in a field, does it become a fossil? No, right? It has to have something kill it, like catastrophically, in order to embed it in something, right? But then the whole assumption is there was no catastrophe. And so don't like swallow the science wholesale. Let it work itself out. But we'd be making a big mistake if we go back and go, yeah, Genesis, it's all mythic language. It's all, you don't have to interpret it literally. Because in the end, we're going to have been wrong. Like that part is going to be wrong.
Yeah, I see where you're going back to the first lecture or the first life thing this semester, where if you start poking holes that way, then you can easily apply that to anything else in the rest of the Bible.
I know at least, I'm not exaggerating, at least 25 people who've lost their faith because of evolution, because of the way evolution supposedly pokes a hole in the Christian worldview. And that to me is unacceptable, right? Like we have fallen down as Catholics if we're just letting people fall away like that. Like we need to understand what's going on. We need to be able to like honestly and intelligently argue back with them and help that not happen because it's the religion of the world now almost.
And also take from the sense of from we call it a natural philosophy sense, and we say, okay, well, this X creature has X form, and so that means it is this thing, and then with the evolution idea, okay, well, at one point it was this, 10,000 years go by, it eventually has to give birth to something that is not itself, or at some point something has to change, which in itself would be like a supernatural or at least a phenomenon we don't observe. Now, even within this framework, even within that philosophical framework, we still say, okay, something akin to, I think Keegan made the distinction earlier of like microevolution in the sense that, okay, this mouse now grows, its kids are going to grow a centimeter longer. The centimeter longer mice survive, and therefore its kids are now a little bit longer. Antibiotic resistance, these that fits within both those frameworks.
Yeah.
There's really solid evidence for that.
There's nothing wrong with like Darwin's finches, right? Like none of them, they're not new creatures, right? They're just the same creatures, just different.
It's not change of form. It's change of certain characteristics.
Yeah, it's just they're accidental. So
How it happens is mutations, like evolution, doesn't just happen. It isn't there's a new thing, like a new environment, so I'm going to change my entire form or part of it. It doesn't work like that. Mutations occur when spontaneous genetic mutations occur, something is being replicated and there's a codon or just a single base pair that's out of place. That base pair change can lead to protein changes, which can lead to like wholesale changes. There's normally it's in the gamete when that mutation happens that it allows to be passed down. This is the only cell that gets passed down to the offspring.
Now
That-
I'm completely lost.
DNA gets changed in an egg or sperm. That DNA gets passed down, egg, sperm, one of them changes some way, right? Like the DNA, some letter changes. Egg and sperm fuse, you've got a new organism with at least one mutation or change. That then grows. If that change is advantageous, then the organism survives. If it is not advantageous, then it has like an or if it's problematic, then the organism dies. And that doesn't get passed down. The advantageous changes, mutations, like individually, it's just a change trait. Well, if it's advantageous, then that organism is going to be able to live, and that trait will more likely be passed down to their offspring. Those mutations, those random mutations, can happen multiple times sometimes, or it's just like it starts with one and it just is really effective, so it can get passed down and keeps getting passed down over like maybe a few generations or hundreds of generations, depending on the thing. And now you've got this original like mutation change that just happens to be advantageous, and now it's in a bunch of the population. There have to be enough of those changes, and to the extent like enough different changes, and like numerically enough organisms and individuals with those changes that that group steadily like changes enough to the point where it's now a new species. And speciation and defining like difference between species biologically gets really messy for a number of reasons.
That's a lot of assumptions.
Yeah, but so here's the only problem with that is that like everything you said is true up to the point where the mutations always come back to the mean. So in other words, every time they've tried to do things in laboratories where they've tried to speed up the time, it always goes to a certain point and it somehow comes back. So that there's no data, even when they try to make it up, and there's a good reason why there's no data for this, that a new species will ever be made from a mutation. And the reason being is because philosophically, form controls matter, not matter controlling form. So the form eventually goes, okay, the matter is so distorted, I can't even make something, or it forms the matter back to the mean. And so, I mean, there's some really good books on this where it just basically, they'll get it all the way over here and then all of a sudden it'll jump back to the middle where it was.
That's the example of that is like peppered moths in England during the Industrial Revolution, right? Like the moths in England, they were the one specific color. They were typically whiter in color because of the birch trees in England were much lighter colored. Because of the Industrial Revolution, a bunch of soot made the forest a lot darker, and people saw that the moths started to get darker, like a very small population of moths started showing up more and more. But that's just simply because like the birds eat the moths that are standing out.
Yeah.
And then when the Industrial Revolution was over, they saw the populations shift back. Then the same moths, it's not a new species, it's just the same moths within that population, the lighter colored moths started to show up more again when that environment didn't change. Like they didn't change, they're still the same peppered moths, it's just that their colors are different.
It's also interesting that you have to throw out like if you take like the world view or whatever now, it's entirely different than what we see in Genesis and all these different ways, right? You have to throw out the flood, you have to throw out the young, you have to throw out like God creating all these things in order to make something like evolution and make something like all that.
Yeah, and that's designed that way. Like that is the way, like Darwin set out to do that. I mean, he was very clear about, he wanted to explain creation without God.
I think scientists are human actors, and like human actors will have in any work that they do, no matter how hard you try, you will pour yourself in the worldview into it. If it's a paper, if it's a comic, no matter what it is.
Right, so we can talk more about this next week when we talk about Adam. But Aaron, did you have a question?
I guess it's kind of more personal, but I feel like a professor that just assumed who's just a classroom macroevolution is correct. Is that even worth dialoguing with them and saying I think you're wrong?
I mean, for me in that situation, probably not. Only, but what I would do is actually learn what they're teaching, right? And then I would do the homework and go, okay, where are the holes? And the holes, I promise, will be in the assumptions they're making, right? Like there is a lot of circular reasoning. Like, they assume evolution, then they use something to prove evolution, and then they're like, evolution exists. Which is amazing when you actually assume the thing you're trying to prove that it actually works out.
I was going to say, like, in the classroom, you cooperate, you graduate, your personal life, you debate it out.
Yes, Keith.
This might get us a little bit more on track. I don't actually know, but should we read Genesis similarly to the way we would read John's Gospel?
In what way? What do you mean?
So, like, there are things in John's Gospel that don't very specifically literally line up with some of the synoptic Gospels. But we don't just throw out, like, everything in John's Gospel, right? We look at it in a way to reveal things that aren't natural in a sort of way.
Yeah, I think you read it in the sense of, similar to that, you read it in the sense that what's being explained was something like a supernatural event. And the fact that we even have like an explanation from it, it has to come from a supernatural source anyway, right? There's like 20 people around, right? And so the language will always limp a little bit, right? All right, so those first six, so the Father of the Church essentially looked at the first 6 days as this sort of supernatural event, and then the seventh day is sort of the day of divine providence. Okay, so this creation providence sort of framework. All right, what's divine providence?
So when you say 6 days, do you mean 6 literal days?
Somebody had to ask that question. Do I mean 6 literal days? Do I want to answer that question?
What do you mean by literal day?
Yes. So if I go off of what the Father of the Church say, they are 6 literal days.
Like 24-hour days.
6 24-hour days.
God had a strong work ethic.
So the same document from the Pontifical Biblical Commission, they asked the question, can we interpret the word yom, which is day, can we interpret that as meaning a day as a normal day or some definitive amount of time, not millions and millions of years? And they said, yes, you must.
What was it? Can you say that?
Yeah, so they said, I want to make sure I get the wording right. I'm pretty sure they said in the affirmative. Let me get the wording. Hold on.
Rob, can I submit formal duties to you? So that word yom that's used everywhere else in Scripture means 1 day. So I think the reason why I'm saying this is I think we're stretching things if we try, like we're trying to stretch the biblical worldview into the all right, so one of the things actually they talked about is, Kevin, you'll appreciate this, is the Mosaic authorship of the Pentateuch. And the answer to the question. So hold on, let me find the one about the day. In the designation and distinction of the 6 days mentioned in the first chapter of Genesis, may the word day be taken to mean either in the literal sense to mean a natural day or in an applied sense for a certain space of time. And may this question be the subject of free discussion among exegetes. And the answer is in the affirmative. So it either is a day or a specific period of time. And most
the fathers all think it was a day, because if you read the first day, it doesn't actually say the first day. It says a day, right? So God makes light, and he separates the light from the darkness, and he says a day. So he's defining what a day is. And the very first thing he does, right? So he creates light, and light doesn't have a source. And then he later on makes the sun and the moon, which is going to actually be the way that we mark days. All right? So there's no reason that anyone just reading that would say, oh, it just means this one.
And also, why would they use the word yom?
Yes, exactly. I think it's something like 157 times in Scripture. It's used, and every single time it means a single day.
Yeah.
So I think we're stretching to go either way. What they're saying is it's either a day or some short period of time, some fixed short period of time. Thank you for asking that question.
But like when you read that part, what I found interesting was it should be interpreted either literally or. When if it's to be interpreted literally, always why is there an or?
I think it doesn't say literally or, it says a day or in the literal sense. In the designation and distinction of the 6 days mentioned in the first chapter of Genesis, may the word yom be taken in the literal sense of the natural day, or in an applied sense for a certain space of time. So I think it's saying either this or that, because it's saying that's a question we can still talk about.
But if the assumption is that things are to be taken only literally, why is there an or?
Because day could be like, you could use day in the sense of like in Jesus's day, right? So that there's a little bit different meaning of the word, but you again mean this sort of fixed short period of time. Could it be used in that sense? I think they're leaving that question open, although it seems like it would be a question you would naturally sort of get the answer to anyway, right?
What it can't be used for is like you say, oh, a day could mean a millennia or millions of years. Like that cannot be used for it. That's what they're saying.
Yes. Yeah, so they're saying essentially that it wouldn't be this millions of years.
I like how they're just like in the affirmative.
Yeah.
No.
All right, so Nicole's question, so you're saying things might still evolve in a certain sense, but not so far as they would form a new species in the affirmative. The creation account discusses the earth and the heavens. What does all the cool stuff out there we can see with telescopes belong to? I think in that sense it belongs to the earth, I think. Although I don't know that it necessarily where those necessarily fall in the creation accounts, because the sun and moon are created on the fourth day, right? But I would say heaven is not the sky of the earth. Kevin. Yes, Connor.
I guess we commented that. I'm not sure if it was the Hebrew worldview or a later kind of thing where you had like this idea of multiple heavens, not in the sense of like multiple places where God's dwelling, that you had image like the sky, and you had kind of
like the imperial
stars, and you had
like St. Paul talks about going to the
third heaven.
Okay, so what is divine providence?
The invisible hand.
Yeah,
Ooh, the invisible hand. So someone says, explain providence to me. What is providence?
That's Providence.
It's providence.
Ask Casey how he discerned that.
He's moving. So I want to take a crack at it. How would you define providence?
In simple terms, just God's timing working out, so like him having everything lined up such that
God acting in our lives in a way we can see.
Yeah, so that is the uniquely Christian part of it, right? Is that so a philosopher would say, okay, God has set up all these natural laws, and things, the apple, it's like the butterfly effect kind of thing, right? Like, if you knew all the little variables, you could predict it. But the Christian understanding of providence is no, you couldn't, because God works in the individual life of the free will person, right down to giving grace that draws us to some good, right? And so, so the Christian understanding of providence is not the same thing that you often read, like founders of this country, right? They'll talk about things happening according to providence, right? And some of them were deists and didn't mean it the way Christians mean it. They couldn't imagine God being involved in the intimate details of your life, right? And so we call divine providence the disposition by which God guides his creation towards his perfection. And so what is the perfection that the Catechism is talking about? God is the sovereign maker of his plan, but to carry it out, he also makes use of his creatures' cooperation. This use is not a sign of weakness, but rather a token of Almighty God's greatness and goodness. God grants his creatures not only their existence, but also the dignity of acting on their own, of being causes and principles for each other, and thus of cooperating in the accomplishment of this plan. And so we see that one of the things that the 6 days of creation gives us is this idea of this sort of hierarchy of creatures, and each is ordered and arranged according to how much of God's power they sort of share. And we see these, like we talked about already, there's these creatures who, both have the imprint of God, so material creatures, the image of God, us, who have intellect and will, and he allows those who image him to also be causes in and of themselves, right? Yes.
This might actually be a really dumb question. So, by this account, does that mean aliens don't exist?
So, all I can give you on the alien thing is my sort of opinion, and I'd say aliens don't exist. Other than angels, if you count angels as aliens. Yeah.
Aliens being rational beings, or just any other being?
Back to your
Rational.
I would say rational beings somewhere
There's
else.
like bacteria and things.
Yeah, I think the issue would be like
little green men.
how could you have like a paralandra or like an unfallen race, or I suppose you could. Although
you couldn't have a fallen race.
You couldn't have another fallen race.
Wait, hold up.
Because
you could not have.
Because it would have.
You couldn't have a fallen race as a different nature, correct?
Because Christ would not have redeemed those. And Christ, the hypostatic union says that only the divine and the human are together. There's no other nature wedded into it.
Is this like an actual debate thing? What's a paralandra?
I'll get to it.
It's a fiction book.
Okay. Hopefully I didn't ruin the book, but all right, so this idea then of secondary causes is one of those things that, I don't want to belabor this point because we've talked a lot about it, but it's one of the things that Protestants sometimes have a hard time grasping, right? Of the fact that God actually creates beings who are then causes of things, right? Like Mary, right? Like he created her and raised her to be a cause of, a instrumental cause of grace in the world. And because that's, in a certain sense, right, it actually shows more of God's power, not less. And this is where people sort of get hung up, right? Like, well, you're taking something away from God. No, actually, I'm not. I'm saying that he's so powerful, he can create a creature that can do that, right? And so often it just takes a little bit of adjustment of looking at things and go, oh yeah, wait a second. Like, actually, the creator looks better when he makes a better creature.
Dig and toil in the earth, and now we just have robotic auto.
Exactly. I mean, that's a certain part of it, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So hidden in this then, the angels. All right. So we're going to spend a little time talking about the angels. So angels could probably get us down bigger rabbit holes than evolution. I don't know how, but they often do. So I will reserve the right to defer to, there's a video from last fall when we talked about angels and demons that I think may have been the longest life ever, I think. It's almost 2 hours long. That's on the CCM webpage. So
Yeah, it was like one I missed, and I was like, whoa, why is it so long?
yeah, it's long. It's long. It's long because questions come up about angels. So, so what I wanted to do this time, because we didn't that time, like if you really want to sort of understand a full like kind of theology of the angels, go listen to that. But what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about what sort of the role of the angels in the church and in our lives. Okay. So surprisingly, the Catechism has just a little bit on angels. It has, I think there's probably 7 or 8 paragraphs. Right. So I want to sort of summarize what they're saying and then talk a little bit about their role in the church and then their role in our lives. Right. So, all right. So here's what the Catechism says, and I'm mushing together some paragraphs here and cutting some stuff out. The existence of the spiritual, non-corporeal beings that sacred scripture usually calls angels is the truth of faith. All right. So what they're saying essentially is that you cannot prove angels' existence by reason alone. Okay? St. Thomas, what he does is says, okay, if you can prove the existence of God, you can say it's reasonable for this sort of hierarchy of creatures that there be angels. But nevertheless, you can't, there's no way to prove through reason alone, and obviously not through some sort of empirical science that angels exist. Witness of Scripture is as clear as the unanimity of tradition. St. Augustine says angel is the name of their office, not of their nature. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a second. If you seek the name of their nature, it is spirit. If you seek the name of their office, it is angel. From what they are, spirit. From what they do, angel. All right, so angel just means messenger, and that's sort of the name we give them in relation to us, right? With their whole beings, the angels are servants and messengers of God. As purely spiritual creatures, angels have intelligence and will. They are personal and moral creatures, right? So, in a nutshell, angels, right? Let's talk a little bit about them. So St. Thomas, always sort of the master of brevity, takes a single sentence in the Summa and then draws all kinds of conclusions from this one thing. All right, this is the angels have not bodies naturally made. All right, so what does that? What are all the conclusions that go with that? Well, it says Catechism already sort of hinted at. Each angel is its own species, right? So there's not this thing really called angels, right? There are each angel has its own species. Why? Why must there be?
Hold up. What?
So there's not one angelic nature, there's probably billions of them. Billions of different angelic natures.
Because there's nothing for them to be distinguished by.
Yeah, so remember when we talked about this sort of cement when we talked about last week about the Trinity? So okay, there has to be differences in beings in some sort, or else they're the same thing. So angels are not, since they don't have matter, they don't have bodies, there's nothing to distinguish one from the other if they have the same nature. Okay, so their natures must be different. All right, so that's his first sort of conclusion. Each angel is its own species. All right. So if angels don't have bodies, how do they come to know stuff? Well, how do you know things with a body? In and through your senses, right? Since they don't have senses, all of their knowledge is infused. Right? So when God creates the angel, he gives them a certain amount of knowledge. Anything else they have to know is either communicated to them through directly from God or communicated from other angels. Angels exist in a hierarchy, and so they can sort of talk to each other in the sense that one angel can tell another angel something. Okay. All right. So that's how they know. Okay. How do they act? Well, they act upon things simply by will. So they will to be in this room. They come in this room. They will to. The angel Raphael wills to take a body to himself so that he can have this interaction with Tobit. He moves just simply by willing it. Matter creates something that looks like a human body. and he walks around and is using it. Okay, so those are the three sort of, yes.
Why is it not so with us?
Why, in what way?
So like, in order for us to act, we have to will it and then like act in the physical world in some way. Like,
yeah, because you're substantially united to your body. So think about the way you will something in your body is the same way they will with everything else, right?
Can there be a disconnect between our will and what we do with our bodies?
Only because we're wedded to matter, yeah. Like you can have something wrong with your body, right? Like I can will to move my arm, but be paralyzed and not do it. So that defect is not in the will, but in the matter itself. Yes.
So you say angels act upon objects directly by their will. So obviously there are certain things they can do that you've said that kind of only affecting spirits in the sense they want to come into this room, and so they're in the room now. We don't have to talk about how they're in the room right now, but we can say, okay, they will it and it only affects spiritual things. But they also can give the example Raphael where they will something and a physical effect happens, and that's implied they have kind of some control, some power over the ability to manipulate matter. Obviously, we don't have, using something akin to the force or something like that. We have our souls, spiritual. I'm not sure you call them substances or something like that, but spiritual things through which but we're not that. We're substantially united to our body, but our soul. Is it correct to say our souls control our body, or is that?
No, that would be correct to say.
So does that mean, because we think, okay, I move my hand, and the kind of natural biology thing, you say, okay, the nerve, that connects to your hand, moves the muscles, and it goes all the way back to your brain. So there's basically philosophically, we say, okay, there's some point in your brain in which that originates by a spiritual influence, like there's some.
Yeah. So when you say like the soul is in the body, you'd say what you really mean the soul acts upon the body. And what does the soul act upon? It acts upon the brain, and because that's the integrating organ of the body. So, and this is why the church teaches about brain death, right? Because what would be the way to know if the soul has left the body? If the organ by which it operates no longer works, right? So there's no integrating function, and so we know the soul is no longer operating on that body because it can't. So that's why they use the brain death criteria.
Now, is it?
What's that?
That's how you kill a zombie.
Somebody tell Casey. I said somebody tell Casey.
Oh.
Because you could still, at least on a material level, keep somebody, kind of hooked up to a machine such that their body would not begin to decay, even though I guess on philosophical level, they wouldn't be human. They'd be, they wouldn't be anything. The body would be.
Yeah, it's still a cadaver, right? Just being whatever you're doing with it, keeping the organs from decomposing faster or something. There's a question. So in Genesis 6, it says the sons of God saw how beautiful the daughters of human beings were, so they took them to their wives. Who does it mean by these people? The sons of God wouldn't make sense to be angels, but it makes it seem like they are different than the sons of human beings. So I think it's St. Augustine in City of God talks about the sort of two interpretations of this. One, he does say that somehow this demonic group took bodies to themselves and did this. But more likely, he says, is that sons of God actually mean, so there's this sort of these sort of two races of men, of Cain and Seth. And so the Sethites would be the sons of God, and Cain would be the sons of perdition. And so if you read City of God, he has a long explanation about it, but it's not clear, like, definitively who it is. Okay. All right, so back to angels. Do I want to say anything else about angels?
Just to confirm, their will is what God tells them to do, like specifically for that moment.
Well, so they have free will, right? Like they can do whatever they want, but the manner in which they act, it still has to have God's permission. So this is going to sound a little confusing because the way it's probably happened. So your guardian angel, like wills your good. He doesn't need God to tell him, like, okay, do this, don't do that, right? Because he is in heaven and he sees God in the vision, so he knows like he's united with God's will in a certain way. But the same thing with you see it more clearly like in the demonic, where demons have a will to do whatever they want also, and but it has to fall under God's providence, whether it allows them to do it.
So is that the same for also the demonic, like the three things, or?
Yeah. So all of this, all of these have to do with just angelic natures in general. So yes. So the only difference, I'll come back to that in just a second. I'm going to talk about the demonic in a second. The angels have been present since creation and throughout the history of salvation, announcing this salvation from afar or near and serving the accomplishment of the divine plan. They closed the earthly paradise, protected Lot, saved Hagar and her child, stayed Abraham's hand, communicated the law by the ministry, led the people of God, announced births and callings, and assisted the prophets, just to cite a few examples. Finally, the angel Gabriel announced the birth of the precursor and that of Jesus himself. Okay, so they're created in the beginning. It's not clear from Genesis, but it is if you read Job chapter 38, when God is sort of chastising Job, and he says, were you there when the morning stars sang together while I created? So there's two things to take away from that. Then. So I think C.S. Lewis does this. I think Tolkien definitely does. The angels didn't help in creation. The angels did not. God created everything that exists. He did it himself as a supernatural act. The angels assist in providence. Okay, so again, there's that clear demarcation between creation and providence, right? And I think that's something that people sort of, because it sounds like a good story, like in the Silmarillion or one of the Narnia books. I don't remember which one it was, but it has something similar. But the angels do not help in creation. All right, so what about guardian angels? From the beginning until death, human life is surrounded by their watchful care and intercession. Beside each believer stands an angel as protector and shepherd leading to life. Already here on earth, the Christian life shares by faith in the blessed company of angels and men united in God. All right, so guardian angel, from all eternity, from the beginning of time, was chosen to be your guardian angel. That was part of their test, whether they would serve you. So they, since they know all things from infused knowledge, God has infused some knowledge of them, some knowledge of us into their minds, so they know us probably better than we know ourselves at times. And their whole role is to help us to get there. And so our goal then on the other side of that is to become friends with them, good friends with them. Right? Yes, Keith?
Does Jesus have a guardian angel?
Jesus had a guardian angel, yes. Yeah, so you even see like in the garden, that's probably the angel that comes in. It's possible that someone has more than one guardian angel. There's all kinds of like theories as to how many like guardian angels people actually have, whether but if you read things like countries have guardian angels, church has a guardian angel, St. Michael. If you read the Tower of Babel, right? How does God decide how many countries to split up into? By the number of angels, right? So he splits off by the number of sons of God, right? So he gives each people that he gives a new language to, he also assigns a guardian angel to that. So again, like that doesn't exhaust what the angel does, but it's part of their relationship with us. Yeah.
And so we say when we kind of not multiply per se, but kind of say, okay, well, there's this angel and that angel. We would say, okay, God doesn't have because he needs to, because it in some way glorifies him to have many creatures involved with all the kind of different.
Yeah, somehow God decided how he would manifest his glory through like fully spiritual creatures and then divvied it up. If that makes sense. Yes. Yeah.
So are there as many angels as people who have ever existed?
Yeah. So yeah, there is at least that many. I don't think they're like most. It's totally speculative, but most like theologians say they don't like guardian angels don't get recycled. So there's probably, I mean,
That could be a different nature.
well, I mean, recycled in the sense of like your guardian angel, like when you die, becomes somebody else's. Not in the sense of like. Yeah, so there is at least as many, and probably many more. No.
Those are just
And those are just angels in heaven, right? Because there's the flip side of that too, right? Like, what about the guardian angels that said no? Like, I will not guard CD. That dude is going to be a mess.
Probably a lot of them.
And they go to the next one. No, I won't either.
So God had created more guardian angels than
Well, see, he already knew, right?
so if he knew that this one's going to say no, so I'm going to make sure I had signed CV at least another guy.
Yes.
The first one said
Yes,
no.
but the same token, that means that if for some reason your guardian angel, original guardian angel fell, there's a demon who has infused knowledge of you, which is never good.
Oh, okay, all right. I don't like that one.
Yeah. It's not a joke anymore, is it? No, that's a big deal, right? Like that is a big
Wait,
deal.
so is that what happens to the ones that say no?
Yeah, I mean, they don't lose their nature. So if a guardian angel, if he's like, seriously, he's like, I won't scare you anymore. So he says like, you're Rob's guardian angel. He's like, oh heck no, literally, hell no, I'm not. And he goes, yes, hell no, you're not. And that's it. But that angel that's now a demon is running around with all this knowledge of me in his mind.
So if we say angels are distinguished by like the way in which they act or like their what do you call it? Like their mission or their purpose, right? Is that correct to say?
Yeah, well, they're distinguished by their knowledge, right? Actually, like it's hierarchical in their knowledge.
So then, if there's a guardian angel created for me who's infused with all the knowledge and me, has the mission and purpose of guarding me, and he falls, wouldn't another one who's created be like the same, or like what's the difference there?
Somehow I don't know exactly how they're different. Yeah, I don't like. It may not be that your backup guardian angel actually was like he has knowledge of something else. This is where it gets evening, right? He has knowledge of something else plus now infused knowledge of you, right? So it's not his nature to, and it's not like it's the only thing they know. Either, right? Your guardian angel, the only thing he knows is not just keep, right? He knows more than that.
Is my guardian angel, can it say no to me after? Is it like, is it
You're right. The poor guardian angel with the secondhand embarrassment. He's like, oh.
Can you go back and it's like, hey, here's a receipt, let me.
No, he wouldn't change his mind.
Okay,
He's
all
fully,
full knowledge. He knew he
yeah, he's fully in. Like, but that's a beautiful part of it, right? Like, there's somebody that, like, literally loves you that much, right? Like, knows the intimate details of you, and still wills your, like, not just your good, but your eternal good. Like, that's a big deal, right? Like, no matter, like, who you meet in this life, you will never find another creature that loves you that much.
The amount of times my friends, people that love me, have called me stupid for things. You can only imagine.
That always makes me think about the fact that, like, before, from the beginning of eternity, when angels were created, it was like yes or no thing. Up until when we were created, they were just like hanging out, so excited, just waiting to meet us and to do their job. Like,
Yeah, I guess,
like,
I don't know about, like, excitement, because don't forget, they have the vision of God, right? Like,
so they're like occupied until how does that work?
yeah, I would say they're occupied.
And
It's
then,
like,
like,
oh,
they
damn.
No, so angels, so
Yeah.
remember, they act by moving their will, right? So they don't actually, like, it's not like they go, hold on, God, I'll be right back, and they turn and go the other way, right? They act upon the same way that saints act on earth, right? Like,
So
by willing.
does that mean we can't get bored? These are dumb questions at this
No.
point. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but like,
No, they wouldn't get bored because if they cease to think, guess what they cease to do? That's their only action, right? Thinking and loving. If they cease to do it, they're bored and don't do it anymore. They're not there. It's gone.
Wow.
I guess.
But I
That's what it is.
suppose if there would be a repercussion there.
They're really taking, like, I think therefore I am, like, hardcore.
So one of the questions on the chat is, what's the difference between soul and the spirit? So, in our case, we have what's called a spiritual soul, meaning, so a soul is the thing that animates or gives life to some living creature, right? And a spirit is intellect and will. So there's a distinction between soul and spirit, although in our case, our soul is spiritual. Hopefully that's as clear as mud. But it's sort of, you get the idea. There is a distinction, although in us, it's not a difference. All right, angels as members of the church. Just very quickly, just understanding angels are part of the communion of saints, right? Let me try to move this a little faster. Last slide. All right, so let's talk just for a second about the fall of the angels, and then we'll talk about divine providence allowing the fall of the angels. So Lucifer is the greatest of all God's creatures. He has the most natural knowledge. His natural knowledge of God is greater than all the other creatures. Right? So remember the distinction between natural and supernatural, right? And so in this regard, Lucifer was absolutely unique, right? Totally unique. He's the most like a God there is. And so he has a choice, and he's tested on this choice of whether he will continue to be unique and like God in that way, or whether he is willing to lose some of his uniqueness by submitting to God's grace. Okay, and he chooses to be like God, right? Which is why he tempts what he does, right? He chooses to be utterly and totally unique like God. He falls in love with his own loveliness, and decides that he would much rather be unique than be, outgraced by the Virgin Mary, lose his place as the highest of God's creatures on a supernatural level. So he preferred to do that rather than enter into communion with other creatures, right? And then he took a whole bunch of other angels with him. Okay, and so that's the fall. That's the fall of the angels. So can't change his mind, because when an angel makes their mind up, it's made up for good. He has no new information. Made the decision full knowledge and will stick to his guns, right? That's why.
Can you elaborate on that? Because like you talked about angels can communicate, like they have their infused knowledge, but God can infuse more knowledge, and other angels can communicate with them. Like, what is? I've heard that before, and like it made sense on the surface, but like the more I think about it, it's kind of confusing.
Okay, so what would cause us to change our mind? New information, right? And so not new information in the sense of like one more fact, but something in this case of something he didn't think about before. So like, I didn't realize that hell was going to be this cold, or something like that, right? So he goes into it with full knowledge, and so there's no new information in that regard to have. So God doesn't just go, okay, like blindly, you just got to make a decision, right? Like he gives the amount of grace necessary to make a full decision. And so it's not simply just that God won't let him change his mind. It's that he won't because he can't, because he has no reason to.
And that's the same with us after
Yeah,
death?
so the same thing with us after death. Our wills at the moment of death are fixed. So,
but we still get like new knowledge in a sense of like growing, like through being in vision, but it's not like new in that.
yeah, so the difference with us though is there's only one thing that will cause us to convert, and that's grace, right? And so when you go to hell, you cut yourself off from actual grace, right? There's no actual grace in. Yes.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood. So it seemed like you were saying that it's a it is a that's a fault, maybe a wrong word, but it's not a, so for us, we would say, okay, when we die, there's something on the level of nature that prohibits our will gets fixed. It prohibits us from being able to change the orientation of our mind.
Well, again, there'd be no new information to be had, right? Like you've made your decision. All the information you needed to make that decision, you wouldn't get any new information. Like what? Do you see what I'm saying?
So I guess what confuses me about it is, say, like, so I can understand maybe for an angel and say, okay, the angel might have been able to see far enough ahead and say, okay, if I reject God, there's probably going to be some sort of punishment. It's going to be maybe something like that. It seems like for most people, they do not. They even if they were fully contemplating, like, yeah, I'll probably go to hell. They did not know. They're not going to know what it's like.
Yeah, I think so. You mean what it's like in the form of the punishment, or the fact that what existence? Because the greatest punishment is existence without God, right?
Yes.
And they already know what that is, and they already know it. That's what they're rejecting, right? They're not going to suddenly go, well, I guess being with God would have been better than having my toes fried, right? So that's not the kind of like their rejection. They've utterly rejected God, right? And that's their greatest punishment, is they go to the place without God. So they've already made that decision. Nothing can change their mind.
And I never regret that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're going to have regret, but it's a regret tinged with absolute hatred for God for doing it.
Like more vengeance regret than like, oh, I should have made a different decision.
Yeah,
We're talking about humans here, right?
yes.
Okay.
But it's similar to the angels, right? Like in that regard, in that their will is fixed. Their will is fixed at the moment of decision. Ours is fixed at that.
I guess my confusion with it is, like, I guess I can definitely understand on kind of a theological level, like you said, okay, mortal sin, deliberative choice, like deliberate choice to commit a grave deal, like it is a rejection of God. Somebody, take a sin of lust or something. Somebody lusts, okay, well that is, you just rejected God, like but it makes sense but in the experiential level of that person, they didn't say, I don't want to be with God, at least in their mind sense. They said, maybe that's the problem with their mind, but they said, I want this thing, and then they died and said, okay, well, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but in essence, when you say, I want this thing more than I want God, is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You've made that thing your God.
Mm-hmm. What about, I guess, what would you say to those who, let me think about it. Maybe.
Okay.
So,
Aaron, did you have a question?
A related question to this.
Okay.
So, whenever we choose to do something, the reason we do it is because at least we think it is good. When nobody does anything, so that, oh, I want the bad thing. So, what is the good that the angels saw in rejecting God?
Yeah. So the good they chose was to essentially reign themselves, not to be under God's dominion, and not to share community with other creatures, including human beings. Like those are the two things they're rejecting.
But what is the good they saw in that?
That they remained so-called free, right? Like they're free to do whatever they want without having to, like, you can see in a certain sense, like Lucifer, right? Where he goes, yeah, there's no way I'm bowing to a man. There's no way I'm going to treat a mere human being as a queen, right? I'm better than that, right?
So it's pride.
Oh, totally. It has to be pride, right? It has to be a spiritual pride. Like that's totally what it is, right? It's totally pride. And that's the kind of, and they're not going to change their mind about that, right? Like they're not going to go, yeah, suddenly, well, maybe treating her like a queen is a better idea now. Because they've already decided that the punishment is way better than actually, it would be more punishing for them to kneel before the God man and his mother than not.
It's like, so what made them make, because I mean, at least maybe it's just the language you said, it's like they decided it was going to be more punishment from them. It almost seems to speak of like an experience, like it would have been more painful for them to do this than it would have been for them to go to hell. Like they don't, or it seems.
Well, we can't know exactly what it's like, but we can know what it's like in our own lives, right? Because we essentially say it would be more painful than to forgo this moment of lust than to just jump into it, right? Like we already have a little bit of what that feels like, although they're just, they're going into it fully aware. All right, other questions? I'm gonna stop there. I have one more slide, but we sort of talked about it already. All right. Always angels always have more to say. So if you want more to listen to, go on the CCM page.